Today I interviewed Nick Spinks, Recruitment Team Manager from the Teach for Australia program. Nick kindly shared his own career journey story from being a litigation lawyer in Brisbane to ending up as a high school teacher in a small country town in Western Victoria. Nick also shared some information about the Teach for Australia program, which seeks to break the cycle of educational inequity and to level the playing field for young people across Australia by recruiting and developing leaders in education. I hope you enjoy his story. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Hi, Nick. Thank you for joining us on the Relaunch Your Career podcast. How are you today?
Good, thanks, Leah. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, look, just to give our listeners some background, I obviously came across you and heard about your career story when I registered recently for a Teach for Australia information session, which I was, registering to, find some more information for my clients who are interested in transitioning into teaching. Now, you currently work for Teach for Australia as the Recruitment Team Manager after actually going through the program yourself and working as a high school teacher. Can you tell our listeners who perhaps aren't aware of the program what Teach for Australia is all about?
Yeah, so there's an education gap in Australia where sometimes your postcode can be a massive determinant in what the education outcomes are going to be. And we're seeing that play out at the moment with the coronavirus. So, for example, a lot of learning is moving online, which is great for people who work who live in the city. But for people who might live remotely or regionally, sometimes they don't have access to the internet or they can't afford a laptop or something like that. So there is an education gap in Australia. That's what Teach for Australia exists to address, to try to bring really high quality candidates into the teaching profession. So it's an employment-based pathway into teaching. I used to be a lawyer. I joined Teach for Australia. You study your master's simultaneously at the same time you're teaching in a school that has a genuine need for a teacher with that background.
And so can you explain to the listeners how the program starts in terms of I understand there's some intensive training to start with before you obviously move into the school environment. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, so assuming you're a successful candidate for the Teach for Australia program, we do a 6-week initial intensive, which starts in mid-November and goes through till the end of December. And then there's another regional-based intensive in January, so in your jurisdiction, be it WA, Victoria, Tasmania, or the Northern Territory. And then you're into the classroom starting in term 1 of that year. So you're getting roughly 25% of your master's degree done before you get into the classroom. And it's really about preparing you for day 1 of the classroom.
And so having gone through the program yourself, how did you find, that intensive program to start with? And then, before you know it, you're actually in front of a classroom.
Yeah, look, I really enjoyed it. When I went to uni, so all our associates lived together on campus at uni. So I came from a college background. So I kind of really loved that environment. It can be confronting for some people to live in that sort of, you're with each other every day, then back at night. So it's called the intensive, and it's intense for a reason. But I enjoyed being in the classroom after that amount of time. I felt like I learned better by doing it. So I felt ready after that amount of time to go into the classroom, and it was a huge learning experience over the 2 years. By no means was I an exceptional teacher to begin with, but it does sort of accelerate your learning.
And in terms of, you come from a law background, which I'm keen to explore in a minute. What sort of backgrounds did some of the other people in the cohort come from, just to give us an idea of, the different types of people who join the program?
Yeah, so Some of my best friends now are from the program, and they were career changers. So Tom used to be a consultant. One of my buddies, Al, was an engineer. We have career changers from a wide range of professions. We have graduates. We have people who have relocated. So I was living in Brisbane at the time and relocated to Victoria for the program. Yeah, we have parents who are coming back into the workforce. We have people coming towards the end of their professional career who feel like they have a lot to offer. We're not strictly a grad program. We're looking for a wide variety of experience.
And so what are the prerequisites required to actually be eligible to join the program before you even get through, into the actual recruitment process?
You have to be an Australian citizen or have permanent residency, and you have to have an undergraduate degree that's not, you have to have an undergraduate degree in something other than teaching.
Yeah, okay.
So the teaching pathway exists for people already with a teaching degree. So that's, they're basically the two requirements. Apart from that, we have our 8 competencies we look for. It is a challenging program, Leah. We don't shy away from that. Mm-hmm. So we have 8 competencies we look for. And if you reach the benchmark, we're really confident that you'll do a good job in the classroom. But the strict eligibility is around the citizenship and the degree.
Okay, great. And so you transitioned, you left Brisbane and you came to Melbourne to do this intense course, and then you found yourself teaching in Ararat. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I had to look up Ararat on the map when I got the position. I'd never heard of it before.
So that for people who don't know, Ararat's a population of about 8,000. I know I've driven through it going to the Grampians many times, but it's sort of halfway between Ballarat and Horsham. Would that be about right?
Yeah, that's about it. It's about an hour west of Ballarat, 2.5 hours from Melbourne. Yeah.
So that would have been quite a culture shock for you coming from Brisbane, because Ararat is also very cold.
Oh, yeah, it was a complete culture shock. Like, even when we went to look at houses out there, I was told in one place we were looking at that I'd need a bushfire plan. And I was from inner city Brisbane. This is, I didn't know what I was doing. They referred to a potbelly at one point, which I thought was a type of pig, but apparently in Victoria it's a type of fireplace. So, yeah, I was out of my depth.
And so what were the, those 2 years, what was some of the more challenging aspects of starting teaching in that environment?
Oh, look, I love teaching and I love the community. What I found probably the most challenging was juggling the uni side plus the teaching side. So with teaching, what you learn is that you can keep going. You're never finished doing everything on your to-do list. So to begin with, I was probably up till midnight a lot of nights lesson planning and still getting the hang of things. Plus you had uni on top of that. So that was certainly for me the biggest challenge, was working out the way to work smarter, not harder. Yeah.
So look, I can imagine, for any new teacher, it's a huge learning curve, but then compound that with the study. I can imagine. And I believe you have a day off your teaching each week to do the study. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yep. Our associates work 0.8. So they have 0.2 to work on their master's degree, which can comprise 2 half days or a full day. And I had 2 half days in my first year, and one of them was Friday afternoon. And by the time Friday afternoon rolls around, sometimes the last thing you feel like doing is an assignment. But so that's what, that to me was the really challenging part, was to work out what worked for me in terms of getting things done.
And what sort of support network do you have both for the teaching and for your study throughout that 2-year period?
There's 3 levels of support you get if you're a Teach for Australia associate. You get an in-school mentor. So that's another teacher on staff who's like your go-to person for school-related matters. You get someone from Teach for Australia called a Teaching and Leadership Advisor, which is what I've been doing for the last 3 years before I took my current position, which is basically a coach He'll come and watch you teach once every fortnight, once every 3 weeks, and go through with you what can improve, what's going well, and what's the data showing about how much these students are growing. And you get someone from an academic mentor from the university who's there to counsel you on academic matters as well. So, yeah, 3 pillars of support there.
Okay, and what were some of the highlights of your time in Ararat?
I just fell in love with the community, to be honest with you, Leah. Like, I never saw myself as someone who would live regionally. I got a deep affinity for the city, and if you'd asked me like beforehand, like some of my loves are like going to the football or eating at restaurants and cafes and things like that, typical. But living in a community, sometimes people are worried about living so close in a community, like you can see students on the weekend and things like that. But I actually really love having that experience. The staff at the school I taught at in Ararat really got around us. And there was a New York Times article once about the joy of being a regular at your local restaurant, and you form those bonds. And there's a restaurant I really liked eating at, and every time I went there, it sort of felt like, it just became a really nice place to be. It sort of felt like home in the end. I played cricket out there, and word travels fast in a small town. Like, I got a duck in a game on the weekend, and I went to Woolworths that evening, and one of the students was, packing the shelves, and he's like, "Oh, I heard you got a duck. Unlucky." Like, how'd you hear that? It happened literally 2 hours ago. So that's the sort of community vibe that you get, I found in Ararat, that you probably wouldn't get. So when I started teaching at a school in the city, I missed that sort of community vibe.
And were you able to, from your experience, growing up in the city and going to schools in the city, were you able to introduce anything new to the school in Ararat that perhaps they hadn't experienced before?
Well, look, I was certainly keen to develop things like a debating program at the school, which didn't exist at the time. And I was also really keen to sort of foster some links with some universities and tertiary institutions in Victoria, like the Melbourne University, for example. Typically, elite unis like Melbourne Uni don't have great representation of students from a lower socio-economic background. So it was important to try to build that access and aspirations for our students.
Yeah, great. And how did others, some of your cohort, did they have, did a lot of them end up in country schools or in metropolitan areas? Like, do you have the opportunity to, put in a preference for where you want to be?
You do have the opportunity to preference. So because at the time we existed in Victoria and the ACT, now we're in Tasmania, Victoria, WA, Northern Territory. We do ask people to put a preference in, and we try to meet that, but we can't always. So, for example, when I was in the program, I wanted to stay metro, but because of my method areas, which were media and legal, that wasn't possible. So I got the offer to go regional and took it, and I'm glad I did.
And then you did move to a city school in Melbourne after your time in Ararat, is that correct?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And what were some of the key differences that you found going from, a regional area to working in inner city Melbourne?
Yeah, so I went to work for another Teach for Australia school, though by this time I was a fully qualified teacher. And just to give you an example, I was a Year 10 coordinator at Ararat, and there were 50 students that I was looking after in Year 10. When I moved to the city school, I was a Year 11 coordinator, and there was as many people in Year 11 as there were in the entirety of the school population in Ararat. It was jarring for me as a coordinator to not know everyone in the year level that I was supposed to be managing. So that was the major difference. And that's why when I talk about community, why I was, in hindsight, feel really fortunate to have had that community experience in Ararat.
Yeah, I can see that. And so then you had the opportunity to join Teach for Australia as the recruitment manager. How did that all come about?
So I didn't join as a recruitment manager. I joined as a teaching and leadership advisor, a coach for our associates. So after 3 years teaching, I was really fortunate. I had an excellent teaching and leadership advisor when I went through the program, someone who really challenged me to be better. And Leah, you probably know it's quite rare as an adult, I think, to have a coach, someone who's there to push you and guide you and give you feedback constantly.
Yeah.
And for me, it was something that I'd sort of aspired to do based on that experience. And because Teach for Australia is such a unique experience, I thought it would be beneficial to have someone who'd been through that experience who can empathise with someone else going through it as well. So I was fortunate to get that job. And so for the 3 years working for Teach for Australia, I worked with roughly 75 associates as they went through the program themselves. And have joined this year, it continued on, but changed my role this year to the Recruitment Team Manager.
Great. And so now you haven't always worked in education. And this is probably one of the reasons why I pounced on you to an interview, because your first career was as a lawyer. And it is quite unusual, I guess, for lawyers. And I have known lawyers in the past who've moved into teaching, but it's not common. Tell us how you came to be a lawyer in the first place, or to choose a career in law.
Yeah, look, I got a good ATAR, and teaching was always in the back of my mind. But I think, like a lot of people, you probably heard that you don't want to waste it. And I wanted, I got into the University of Queensland and got into law, and just went through that pathway with sort of, you sort of had to do law or medicine, right, if you get a certain mark. And I picked law, to be perfectly honest with you, because I wanted to do Law Reviews, which is a comedy show that law schools put on. So that seemed like as good a reason as any to do law. I didn't think it through. And I had a great time doing that. But then when it came to graduate, it meant I had to get a job as a lawyer, and I was really lucky to be working in a law firm at the time, and they offered me a grad position and I accepted it. So I didn't grow up wanting to be a lawyer, but I thought, I've got the qualification, I should at least, do it for a few years and see how it goes.
And were there some aspects of working in legal that you enjoyed?
Not really, no. I think, look, my time as a lawyer coincided with the global financial crisis. And the quirk of the legal system at the time was that in an economic downturn, every part of the law firm, the business goes down. In family law, business goes up. So I was moved into family law, and it just, for me, wasn't an enjoyable part of being a lawyer. It really brought out the worst in people, I felt. And from a personal point of view, it didn't feel purposeful to me either. So, yeah, I had a real struggle with that. And Sunday night would roll around and I'd really dread the thought of another week.
And what was there a catalyst that brought about the change? Because I know you also, before you moved into teaching, you also went into a role doing some more writing sort of production work. Was there a catalyst that, made you decide to leave the law, or was it something that you'd sort of thought about for a long time?
No, I'd thought about it for a long time, and it was, look, I think to be a good lawyer, you have to love the law. And I didn't have that love of it. Like, I have friends who are still lawyers now, and they're very successful at it, but they do genuinely love the law. And I didn't. So at the end of my grad contract, it was time to move on, and it was time to try to do something else. And for me, that was to continue that writing thing, which started through the Law Review, and try and get into TV and do that. So from there, I got a job with a production company in Brisbane as a development executive. So trying to develop TV shows and things like that. And that was a fun job. So compared to law, that was just plain fun. Certainly didn't look backwards in that respect.
Before you left the law, and I think this is something I find often people who have got a really high ATAR and have pursued a career in law or medicine or something like that, the actually telling your family and your friends that you're going to, walk away from law after all of that study and getting a graduate position. How did your family and friends react to that?
Oh, look, I think they were pretty surprised. Like, for a while afterwards, my dad kept telling people that I was a lawyer. So there's definitely, neither of my parents went to uni, so there was some pride in that. But I've always been someone who's sort of marched to the beat of my own drum anyway, so I wasn't too influenced by other people. But I know, like, there was some surprise at that.
Yeah, look, and it's I can relate to your experience. My first career was I worked at a Big Four accounting firm in corporate tax, which was pretty much is tax law. And, I actually love the environment. I love the people, still, have a lot of friends from that time. But I would sit in tax training sessions and look around the people in the room who were really into tax and just lived and breathed it. And I just thought, I am never going to be interested in tax, and I'm still not. But, you just know, don't you, whether it's something that, you're going to be interested or passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so Teach for Australia I came to through law, to be honest with you, because one of the assistants in our firm at the time, so I was a lawyer, she was an assistant. We were friendly, like in a group of young sort of employees in the firm. And she got a grad offer for the law firm, but didn't take it to take up a position with Teach for Australia. And this was 10 years ago, going back to the first cohort of our associates. And something about it, when she was explaining Teach for Australia to me, always just stuck in my mind. And it wasn't until 5 years later that I thought, maybe I should apply for that program, because it had just been sort of marinating and whirling around my brain for 5 years.
Yeah. And do you feel like, we do a lot of work in our career coaching around personality type and personality fit. How do you feel your personality, do you feel the teaching and the work you do now is a much better fit for you personality-wise than when you're in the law?
I do. I feel like really lucky to have found this pathway. I love it. It's genuinely become something that I'm passionate about, is working in education. And through my job at the moment, I still get to teach at university, which I really love as well. I guess the thing about teaching is it doesn't really matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert or an ambivert or what, because I think different parts of it appeal to different people. So I really loved the teaching part of it, being in front of kids, teaching them. Other people really enjoy the intellectual challenge of diving deep into the data and doing research on new and latest pedagogical strategies and things like that. Other people like looking at it from a systems level change, like how can I change this system to make it operate more efficiently? So I think no matter what your personality type is, you will find something to love. What I would say is that the people who are perfectionists can struggle sometimes, because you will never achieve perfection in that role. Like, if I'm writing a letter of advice, I can probably write something very, very good. But there's always something to improve with teaching. And that can be jarring for some people.
Yeah. And look, I agree. I do a lot of work around Myers-Briggs personality type. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but often people who have that, it's an FJ combination. So they're helpers, and they are built to service people and don't like people to be left waiting, and they're always trying to do more than they probably should, combined with the fact that they're really strong planners and they like to be in control. So I do find some of those teachers, and a lot of them do have that personality combination, that they're always trying to sort of over-service and perhaps not ask for help and putting their hands up and taking on too much. And that can sort of lead to burnout.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah, we have as one of our competencies at Teach for Australia humility, respect and empathy. And humility, part of that is actually saying, I do need some help here.
Yeah, and really important. And often, sometimes I work with teachers who are leaving the profession for that reason, that they've burnt themselves out. But at the same time, it doesn't matter what profession they go into, they'll probably always have those tendencies that they're always trying to over deliver and take on too much, which can lead to burnout in any career.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. Yeah, for sure.
So if some of our listeners are interested in finding out more about Teach for Australia, how can they find you or find out more about the program?
So people can reach out on our website, which is teachforaustralia.org, and fill out an expression of interest on the website. And a recruiter will get back to them for a phone conversation after that to tell them more about the program. That's probably the best way to do it. We also have information sessions, which is how I assume you came across us, Leah, as well, through our website. There's an events section where people can register to join one of our information sessions or a Meet the Recruiter session as well.
So having gone through this whole career change experience yourself, what advice would you have, Nick, for people who are perhaps doing work that, where they feel quite stuck and they're not passionate about what they do? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I was having to think about this before, actually. I think doing something, I'm really lucky because in teaching and what I'm doing now, I find it both purposeful and fun. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. And I think if people can find something that really floats their boat, that they find purposeful, that they get meaning from, and you can overlap that with enjoying yourself while doing it, that's where I've found my productivity has peaked, because I really love doing what I do. And I'm just personally really grateful that I took the path that I did of not settling with the golden handcuffs, so to speak. So yeah, I don't really have too much experience, too much advice to give, other than just to encourage people to find what they find purposeful and fun. And if you can get that combination, you're laughing.
Yeah, and look, it sounds, we talk a lot about sort of that sweet spot, which is, where you find work that energizes you, work that you're actually naturally interested in. Plus, it comes naturally to you. You're using your strengths, and it doesn't feel so much like work, because it, it feels much easier than, say, reading tax legislation.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Like, even on that front, like, teaching will take it out of you. Like, you sleep really well. It is an excellent way to get some quality shut-eye at the end of the day. But there is something energizing even in the midst of, like, having a big workload. Like, when I was an associate through this program, doing the uni, doing the work, all that, it's still energizing, even though you do have to manage your well-being.
Yeah. And look, I think that's right. You can still be busy and tired, but if you're energized whilst you're doing your work, then you tend to be, much more engaged and just generally happier. So it's good to hear you found your sweet spot.
No, thanks a lot.
And look, it's been really interesting talking to you about the program. I've learned so much from, first of all, doing the information session, and then, having a chat with you now. And I think, it's a great option for people who often are interested in teaching but are really put off by, having to go back and study for 2 years at university without earning an income.
Yeah, absolutely. To get full pay and full benefits while you are working is a truly it's a nice thing to be able to do.
Great, Nick. Well, look, thank you for joining me today. It's been really fun to talk to you, and I've learned a lot. So appreciate you jumping on the podcast, and best of luck recruiting your cohort for the remainder of the year.
Thanks, Leah. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.